that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine. Do you know the difference between an error and a mistake? Welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, now read by Disney or Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it. Legends. And we are at the finale. 9 books down, 2 more books to go, and I'll have read the entire Expanded Universe and post Return of the Jedi twice. The rest of the Expanded Universe, not so much. Would have been my first time, especially during, Dawn of the Jedi onward. But from after Return of the Jedi, this is all familiar territory for me, and I'll be concluding it for the second time in my whole life. Today I have for you Fate of the Jedi Apocalypse by the ever so controversial, popular figure, Troy Denning. It's the conclusion. What can I say here? I mean, I've had such issues with this series as a whole. Now, in a sense, when I talk about pacing, it is subjective. However, when you are making a certain act structure, right, like Game of Thrones, or House of the Dragon, or Breaking Bad, or Better Call Saul, those episodes do not go on forever. They are about, a lot of these shows go to 8 to 10 episodes, maybe 13 at the most, but everything always feels necessary in those shows. Well, to a certain point of Game of Thrones. This isn't the olden days of television where you have 24 episodes per season, which is just usually unnecessary. I've seen few shows where that many episodes is necessary. You end up getting a lot of episodes, if it's a good show, where it's a filler episode, but they use that to be a very character-focused episode, or it's a bad show and you just have filler for filler's sake because you need to pad out the runtime of the season. Starting with New Jedi Order, they decided to do this whole big thing of a multi-author written experience. And the hype behind that, as that's coming out, must be astronomical. And I know my first time going through all of it, as a fan who had never gone and read these stories before, it was immaculate. I saw no flaws. I mean, I would mention some things, but overall, I loved it, and I praised it all to high praises, because this was my first experience, going through it in the EU, and I was like, that's amazing, that's amazing, that's amazing. It's not the sequel trilogy, so, I kind of glazed it. I kind of just, ignored any flaws. I tried to be more objective, more critical as I went through NJO a second time. I still love reading that series to death, and the only ones that generally give me any issue reading them are the Force Heretic trilogy. Outside of that, I love reading it just because I get to be in the universe of Star Wars longer, and the NGO conflict is so cool and so much fun. But if you are not just looking at it as a fan and trying to have fun, if you are trying to be objective with it, I don't know how you couldn't make these complaints that why have 19 books and have a good portion of them not actually progress the plot at all, outside of just filling out space because you determined it was going to be this many books. And it's less egregious in NGO at times because they had so many different authors and so many different flavors of writing that you could kind of endure it. But even still, I feel like anybody who says there's no fatigue that sets in if you're reading them back to back to back, you're kidding yourself. I mean, it may have flowed better as it was coming out, because you get like a couple releases every year. You're like, yeah, new Star Wars book, but trying to read it, it's the similar thing of network television used to have, weekly entries, whereas now a lot of things you stream, you could just watch all the episodes in one sitting, but a lot of times it doesn't flow well if you do it that way. And I feel that NGO had this problem at times where 19 books and the fatigue can set in if you're reading them back to back to back to back. And I felt, surprisingly, even though people usually hate on Dark Nest more than a lot of other things, I think Dark Nest was paced better because it was only a trilogy in one focus, one mind behind it. You get to Legacy of the Force. I feel like it handled it fairly okay, but even then, by like book 7, 8-ish, it started to overstay its welcome. And Fate of the Jedi, again, I don't think it's subjective to say that if you're looking at it objectively, you can see that a lot of these books are padding out the runtime. I mean, the amount of lore, the amount of exposition, the amount of things I actually learned in this book is because they didn't address any of this beforehand. We learn about Abeloth's motivations, her goals, her desires, her origins, all in this book, the 9th book in a 9-book series, and I'm only now learning all the important, necessary information about Abeloth. It'd be one thing if she'd been in the series early on and she was mysterious and threatening and powerful, and she was shown throughout the series, and they waited to like book 7 or something to finally reveal bits and pieces of information. It could have strung me along, but instead it just tiptoes around her, has several other plot points, and waits to this book to actually like mainly progress the plot, which is why I feel these long series just ultimately have pacing issues. And I guess that is a subjective thing to say, but I feel like there are objective measures to make that statement, that it is just a legitimate objective problem in this series. And so that frustrated me. That being said, this book in of itself, I thought was actually pretty good. A lot of people say that this book is bad from what I've heard. Worse than all the other ones. I don't know. I mean, stuff actually happened in this book. Plot was progressed. Character moments were advanced. Everything came to a head. It actually mattered. But at the same time, it doesn't at all. And we'll get into that. But overall, I enjoyed this one a lot more. I think it goes the first book, the third book, and that's like it. Because there's bits and pieces of all of them, but there's not a single book that I've liked throughout. And even this one, it's not even that much of a problem. Just there's a lot of fighting in this book, and I don't care about action scenes. That's a me personal thing. So it just would drag in those sections. But overall, this is the big shebang. In the last book, we learned that Abeloth was in control of someone that was about to become chief of state. So Abeloth's in control of Coruscant. Now the Sith are on Coruscant, and it's the Jedi's job to save Coruscant from the Sith and the Abeloth menace. Are they going to succeed? Well, the Legacy comics exist, so we know absolutely they do. Sort of, kind of. Not really. But, so that is the big conundrum here. We learn a lot of revelations about Abeloth's past, about why she's even doing the things that she's doing, because so far the only things we've really concretely gotten is that she's lonely. So this is a lot of explaining here of what's actually going on. We get teases for other villains that matter later on, and a whole bunch of shebangs, and fun times, and spiritual stuff mixed in there. I overall enjoyed it. Mainly because it is forced to progress the plot, because all the other books kind of meandered through it. This book has to get the job done, because it's the end. And for that, I give major props. But yeah, Jaina's fighting on Coruscant, Han and Leia and Alana, and every Jedi you can think of that matters at this point is there, and they're all doing their part. They're doing what they can. Every character gets involved. Boba Fett comes in for a little bit. Dala's there. Everybody's there. Everything gets finished here except that it doesn't. And I'll get into that in the end. But basically, just so you know, and this is one of the main reasons, like I know I'm sounding negative, but one of the main reasons that Expanded Universe fans are so upset is because there's no conclusion. Despite the gripes I've given you all throughout this 9-book series, despite my honesty, despite what I have said about this series, I still want a conclusion. Mercy Kill is basically a side story that has nothing to do with the main plot, which is fine, because it's called X-Wing and not Fate of the Jedi, so I don't mind it being this whole separate thing. Anyway, and Crucible is not an ending. It, in fact, still continues to leave plot threads open, and it's that I think truly gets to us EU fans. 2014, the buyout happens. Disney now owns the rights. All these shows are coming out. The Acolyte is the most recent one dating this video that just came out. And all these new shows and all these new experiences for fans, but no conclusion to the stories that even got Lucasfilm to where it's at. I don't care if the stories post New Jedi Order aren't perfect, and they certainly aren't. In a lot of ways, they are weaker than what came before. And I'll be honest about that, and I can be honest about that. But regardless, these characters have existed for so long in our consciousness, in stories by different authors, penned by different people. They deserve a true ending. I mean, because of the stories we have, they're so vastly different to the Disney counterpart, they deserve their own conclusion. The Expanded Universe doesn't need to be continued, in my opinion. It needs to be concluded in a satisfying way. So that way, while it may be sad that the EU is over, the fans that appreciate these stories, even when they have legit criticisms to give, make it all be worth it by giving me a conclusion. End these stories. Give them proper send-offs. And you won't hear me ever argue again about Give Us Legends so long as you give me a satisfying conclusion. But that's my little soapbox. That's too much I want to talk about non-spoiler-wise. But if you've been with me for these reviews and you've disagreed with me, that's okay. But tell me about your love for this series if you do love it. And if you're like me and you're a bit more iffy on it, tell me about that too. Tell me why, if you're like me, that despite however you may feel about the series, positive or negative, why you want to see the series concluded, why you want to see Abeloth be truly and utterly defeated. Find out what happens with the Lost Tribe. Find out why Luke doesn't stop Crate until the Legacy comics. We want these answers. What about you guys? What do you think? In the comment section below, please let me know. Now, if you have not finished this book, and you do not want spoilers, it is time for you to skedaddle. The beginning opens with Win being tortured. Now, Win Dorvin was a character introduced into this series, and he's one of the greatest additions that Fate of the Jedi brought to the entire Expanded Universe. Win Dorvin is a really great character, and to see him be in pain like he is because of Abeloth and the Sith is really sad. And I just want to mention that because it's a hard thing to read for me. It was hard for me to read in the beginning. Now, early on, there are some conversations about Alana's goodness, and we're seeing things from Alana's perspective, and, she gets visions, and she wants to save the Bearables or whatever, and, Leia's worried about that, because it's the same thing that Jason did, was see visions, But throughout it all, you see that Alana is inherently good. But one thing that popped into my mind, and I think the book also slightly addresses this, the reason that this series specifically gives us as an added addition as to why Jason fell to the dark side was that he saw a child he had not had yet turn to darkness and evil and cause reigns of terror beside a dark man for years and years and years, for suffering and oppression of the entire galaxy. And this series makes it abundantly clear that is what was supposed to happen. Of course, balance, eventually Alana and Crate, spoilers, would have been defeated but there would have been... In fact, if you think about it, Krayt was already pretty old and dying by the time of the Legacy comics. Could it be, had Alanna turned to the dark side, had she became the disciple of Darth Krayt, maybe she would have taken out Krayt herself instead of Warlock or whatever. Perhaps she would have become so much more terrifying, so much more powerful than Krayt could ever hope to be. Maybe that advantage, and her prolonging her life, because Krayt would have taught her, would make it so Cade would have no chance of stopping his, great-great-aunt or something like that? I don't know how that would work. But perhaps the events of Legacy comics would be vastly different had Alanna turned to the dark side. But what is made abundantly clear by Jacen's decisions in Legacy of the Force and Darknest is that his decisions did, in fact, absolutely change the future, which is always in motion, yes, but he changed it. Krayt says he may have just delayed it, but the vision was Alanna with Krayt. But as we see Alanna in this series, the future's changed because she's not going to turn to the dark side. She will not become a villain. But what if that's part of it? Luke Skywalker always fears becoming his father. He fears his students becoming his father. That fear, even when he does do it in Dark Empire, it's that makes him terrified of ever using the dark side, of ever even having an inkling of it in his brain, because he does not want to become his father because he knows he would be greater than him. But what is his example? Palpatine and his father. So perhaps in some tragic way, Jacen going down this path, which at first he may have felt like he was in control of and it was all fake in order to do this sacrifice, ended up becoming reality because the dark side absolutely does corrupt. The entire expanded universe supports this notion. No matter what anybody says, it does. Maybe you should read more of the EU. But I keep reading through this book and I think about the fact that Alanna is scared and saddened by her father's passing and of what he became. So could it be not that the example that Jacen set is exactly what made it so that Alanna would never turn? By constantly having her father as a reference point as to what not to become. Not really loving her father, fearing him and seeing him as an example of what not to be. And what if that was ultimately the sacrifice that Jacen had to give? The love of his daughter and a good memory of his family to have of him. To give that all up for the sake of his daughter not falling to darkness. Maybe Krayt is truly the lesser threat. Maybe Alanna could have been more powerful than Luke. Certainly possible. Don't know. All I'm saying is that it is abundantly clear that her goodness, especially in this series, comes from her trying to not be her father, to be the exact opposite of that. And I also want to mention Jacen one more time. So, there you go. But this is my bread and butter, is just that this little particular spot. I think it's so intriguing, I think it's so nuanced, and I think people are super simple to either argument. Whether like, nah, Jacen's just a Sith, Vergier's a Sith, or it's all garbage and stupid. I think there's no nuance even attempted to be had with this conversation. I'm glad to be the one that does that opposite thing. Moving on. Vistara's character. Vistara, whatever. I love her character development. I think it's great. They put her into a more villainous role in this story, even though she's clearly conflicted. And the way all the characters talk is like that she's just a lost cause. And I hate that because, I mean, they forgive Vader. And Vader has done so much worse than anything that Vistara has done. The problem was they tried to make her a Jedi so soon after her entire life has only been Sith. You know, they just rushed her into things she wasn't ready for. And I still think in my heart of hearts, at least in my own interpretation, of course I would accept whatever the EU said if we got a continuation, is that Vistara Kai would be redeemed. And that she would marry Ben. But we don't know. But so what they do with her, though, here is good. It's not contradictory or anything. It's just not the direction I would like it to go. But at the same time, it doesn't even matter because it's not really an end to her character. She's still alive by the end of this. But I do think Vistara's character development was phenomenal in this whole series. So when we finally get Abeloth lore, she was a servant to the Ones. And she basically became their mother. And she loved them dearly, and she loved the father dearly. These, of course, are the ones from the Mortis arc of TCW by Filoni, where Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka Tano went to this place, and they met the son and the daughter, who were light and darkness, and the father that kept them in check. And then Anakin, they killed them all. No, but that's the big thing here, is that Abeloth is connected to them, and that she did not want to leave her family, so the original intention here, and what the Killiks remember at least, of course Killiks aren't always known to be the most accurate source of information, is that she was saddened at the fact that she was going to die before them, because they're not going to die. And she wanted to be with her family forever, so she bathed in the pool and became this eldritch, Lovecraftian monstrosity, this bringer of chaos. And it was really interesting and really cool. Now, of course, Supernatural Encounters has come out, and I think what they do with her is vastly more interesting. I'll leave a link in the description to where you can read it for free on StarWarsTimeline.net. I'll also leave a link to a live stream I did with a couple of my friends on Marcel's channel, The Revanchist, where we went through the entirety of Supernatural Encounters, which is in Book 6, where we talked about Abeloth and But that book dives a lot deeper into Abeloth's origins and connects it to the Devil Worlds comics, which I personally... Now, while the concept of just being a normal mortal who becomes something more because not wanting to be alone, I think is compelling enough in of itself. However, with the substance we have from the Supernatural Encounters novel, I vastly, vastly, vastly prefer that over what we have here, which is interesting, but it's still very vague and just, frankly, too little too late to really care that much about it. But it's still... As much as I hate TCW, and again, the Mortis arc is something I talked about on the Expanded Universe website, and then on a podcast I did with Marcel and Brennan, which is how the Mortis arc of Filoni is that it's like a cake, but all they give me is frosting. Like it's meant to be this deep philosophical, spiritual story, but it's ultimately a nothing burger. Like, there's nothing to it. It's just empty, void of actual meaning. But because of this book series and Supernatural Encounters, there's actually a lot more depth, especially Supernatural Encounters, granted to those stories. It actually make it something worth viewing. But on its own, it's just kind of a weird thing that came about. But it is an interesting arc, regardless. It gets people's minds rolling, sometimes in the wrong way. And so I do give props, I guess, to Filoni for that. Because if it wasn't for Filoni, we wouldn't have... I know it's crazy, I'm praising Filoni on something. I never do that. But without Filoni, we wouldn't have Fate of the Jedi, even though I've been very mixed on that and I've been very open about that. But still, Fate of the Jedi introduced us to Abeloth. And without Abeloth, a certain section of Supernatural Encounters wouldn't exist, which is one of my favorite parts of Supernatural Encounters. So by and by, in a long stretch, I have to rain down my hat of an EU fan hat, chuck it across the room like I did for Bounty Hunter Wars, and admit defeat that George Filoni is king. No, I'm just kidding. I don't care. He's king of Disney, because it's only people who just eat it up like candy. But, no, I do give props to that arc. I have issues with it on its own, but because of it, there's been a lot of substance added to the expanded universe. So, thanks, I guess. Moving on, Daala and Abeloth, I literally, maybe I missed it, I literally just at some point in the book, it says, oh yeah, and Daala teamed up with Abeloth. Okay, I guess, whatever. I stopped caring about Daala in this book, I gotta be honest. Like, they for a long time tried to make her consistently be a reformed villain trying to do the right thing, but falling into antagonistic parameters. And I like that about her. I like that she was a former bad guy trying to be good in the only way she knows how, and that just comes into conflict with the heroes. Like, she's not inherently wrong, but she's falling back into bad habits. But somewhere along the lines, they just kind of drop that, and then she just goes right back to being what she always is. Why ruin that? You brought so much nuance to her and so much interesting stuff with her, and you just dropped it. So honestly, I don't really care to tell you what's been going on with Dala, but she's there, I guess. Also, there's a section of the book where Fett teams up with Tahiri, and that was actually pretty well written. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Fett when he was written by Karen Travis. I don't care about him anymore. I just going right back to, oh, cool, he's here, because he has to be. He is getting stuff to try to maybe get the stuff off of Mandalore so he could step foot on Mandalore again, which would be nice for him. But ultimately, it was fine. It was okay. It's cool to see him, I guess, but I don't know. Wasn't feeling it as much. Abeloth's plan. What are the coolest things about this book? So originally, she wanted Luke, but Luke's kind of like, nah, back off thought, so we kind of dropped it. But she wanted Luke to become the new father. She wanted Ben to be the new daughter, because he's too much light side, so he can't be the son. And she wanted Vistar to basically fill the son role, while she would be the mother, and she'd basically have her family again. And I thought that was a really cool idea, and really like kind of like makes it feel like more cosmic and biblical. And I like that. I just wish I would have known more of her motivations beforehand, instead of just, I'm hungry. This isn't Darth Nihilus. This is Abeloth. She's a different character. Give me some substance. But they waited to this last book to exposition. And this isn't inherently a problem, but it's very noticeable when you start going exposition dump, exposition dump, exposition dump. Now you know. They wouldn't have to do that if they had spread out this information throughout the series. Instead, they just wasted all this time to wait till now to finally explain what's up with Abeloth. But that being said, I really liked, it wasn't just a, let's kill the world, let's reshape it in our image, and I don't have to be lonely anymore, I can have a family again. Like, something about it, I just really liked it. Not that it matters. Also, I forgot to mention, Abeloth can just inhabit, like, multiple bodies. Like, I'm trying to be positive, more positive in this one, because I did generally like it more than the other ones, but oh my god! Supposed to be a god-level threat. The one time you can go bigger than New Jedi Order. Like, I'm serious. Like, I'm also dating myself here. But the most recent Doctor Who episode, sorry if you haven't seen it, just brought back an old villain from Classic Who. And everybody's rightfully scared because it's a godlike entity. It's not like the typical things that the Doctor deals with. It's something that is literally beyond him. This is the one time you can act like that here, because nothing is ever going to be bigger than the New Jedi Order Vong invasion. Nothing will ever top that. But you could still, this god-like entity, one time you can go bigger than New Jedi Order, but it never feels like that. It never feels like that. And oh, she can inhabit 3 bodies at once. Oh, you know who else could do that? IG-88, and he's a droid. And that story was written by Kevin J. Anderson, who everybody loves to scoff at. But here, Abeloth's doing the same thing, making it seem cool, even though a droid without the Force can already do that. So it's just that's the extent of, oh my god, she's this all-powerful, nobody could stop her entity, is that she has 3 bodies that people can kill. But that's the thing, too. She's not fully dead by the end of this series, but we'll get there. Sorry. We get near the end of the book. There's a lot of fighting in between that, and, you know, Vistara tries to go against, you know, the Jedi. She decides she's going to be a Sith. She's going to help the Sith. But then Abeloth captures her and Ben, so she, you know, helps Ben escape, and, you know, they still love each other. She does clearly love him, but, you know, she's going to be a villain, so she leaves on her own, and, you know. But the cool thing here is we get, you know, like Avatar: The Last Airbender, not really, but, you know, Luke and this mysterious figure Darth Krayt show up to fight Abeloth in the spirit realm, and they win. Now, to be fair, people were saying this was like a huge contradiction. Literally where? So basically, Luke has a suspicion. He has no inherent fact that this guy isn't a Lost Tribe member, that he is something else entirely. Mostly because he has tattoos on his face and none of the other ones do. Though he even speculates that, Vestara could have been lying. I don't know. But unless I'm just insane or I don't remember, his name is never mentioned. So Luke has some vague notion of what's going on with this guy, which isn't enough to really hunt him down. But it is something he's probably going to want to further look into, after seeing this guy. But anyway, so they join up, Jedi and Sith, to defeat Abeloth in the spirit realm or whatever, which they do. And Abeloth is defeated. Her 3 physical bodies and this is gone. She's dead forever, right? No, because the only way you can kill these beings is with the Mortis dagger, which is also further dealt with in supernatural encounters. But anyway, so she is defeated for now. She's way less powerful, even though she never even seen that powerful to begin with. But she's way less powerful. She's going to be way less of a threat, but she's still there, and she's still going to come back. She's not in prison again. She's out there. She's gaining strength that she can return, and they need to be ready. So Luke wants them to find the Mortis dagger, so that way they can, next time she pops up, they could defeat her forever this time. So again, not really an ending. And Vestara leaves to go meet up with whatever Lost Tribe members are left, and again, plot thread not concluded. That's still a threat. Meanwhile, also, Luke has some suspicion that this guy, Darth Krayt, we know, is not a part of the Lost Tribe, that he's something else entirely. Krayt even says that we are more than one, so now he knows that there's a whole other faction out there, possibly, if his hunch is correct anyway. So that's something else he has to look into, and there's no conclusions here. Mercy kills a side story, and Crucible doesn't conclude any of these plot points. So we're just, left with this huge thread. But anyway, I really enjoyed the Beyond Shadows aspect of it. I enjoyed the spirit fight and everything. I'm trying to see what else I can talk about here. But, oh yeah, also Jag and Jaina finally get married. Finally. And it's happy ever after for now. But not really. Overall, it's fun. I think it's a lot better than some of the other ones, which is going to be blasphemy to some. But I mean, at least plot actually happens here. And I know this series has been a mixed bag for me. I'm really sorry. I want to be positive about the EU in every way, shape, and form. Every time I talk about it, I want to just glaze it for days. I want to just speak its praises all the time. Right? I'm a big EU fan. I want to spread that love to everyone. But I also have to be honest when I'm just not feeling it. I just feel like there's some writing issues here in terms of characters, plot progression, the pace of the story, which I do think is an objective measure that you can make, and just, I don't know. This series isn't bad. It's just not an epic continuation of Star Wars like you would hope it would be. But it was fun, and it introduced a lot of cool things, so I'm really glad for that. Up next, we have Mercy Kill by Aaron Olston, the final X-Wing book, and the final Star Wars book that Aaron Olston worked on. At least I'm pretty sure about that, which is really sad, because at this point in time, he has, of course, passed away from us. But I look forward to reading it. And then we have Crucible by Troy Denning, and then we'll be done with the novels. I'm going to read some fan fictions, and then Legacy Comics once again. So I hope you all join me for that. Thank you all so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.